Something's happening to you that makes no sense. You're seeing things others can't see, understanding dynamics that remain invisible to everyone around you, perceiving patterns, motivations, hidden truths beneath surface interactions. And this sight, this sudden clarity, isn't making you feel enlightened or superior, it's making you feel dangerous. Because the things you're seeing, the truths you're perceiving, they threaten everything. The social structures around you, the comfortable lies people tell themselves, the illusions that hold families, organizations, entire communities together. And you're realizing with growing horror that you can't unsee what you've seen. Can't pretend you don't understand what you understand. Can't go back to the blessed ignorance that made you safe and acceptable and included. You've crossed into what Carl Jung identified as the Sophia stage, the phase of dangerous wisdom. And what you don't understand yet is that this wisdom will either destroy you or transform you, but it cannot leave you unchanged. Jung discovered that certain individuals, particularly those deep into the individuation process, reach a point where they suddenly develop what he called penetrating sight, not psychic ability. Not supernatural perception, but a psychological clarity so acute, so unflinching, that it allows them to see through the veils that most people need in place to function. They see the shadow motivations behind people's noble actions, the fear driving what looks like love, the control masquerading as care, the manipulation dressed up as support, the violence hidden in politeness, the cruelty beneath kindness. And this sight isn't something they asked for, isn't something they cultivated through practice. It arrives spontaneously, often unwanted, as a natural consequence of their own psychological work. They've faced their own shadow, integrated their own darkness, acknowledged their own capacity for deception and self-betrayal. And having done that work, having developed the courage to see themselves clearly, they can no longer avoid seeing others clearly, can no longer participate in the collective blindness that social life requires. Jung called this the Sophia stage, after the Greek concept of wisdom. But he emphasized that this wasn't the safe, comfortable wisdom that gets celebrated in spiritual communities. This was dangerous wisdom, destabilizing wisdom, the kind of knowing that makes you a threat to every system built on collective denial. And he documented that individuals in this stage face a crisis that most never successfully navigate. Because dangerous wisdom demands dangerous choices, and most people, when forced to choose between keeping their wisdom and keeping their place in society, choose blindness, choose to forget what they've seen so they can return to being safe and included and accepted. Today, I'm going to reveal what the Sophia stage actually is, why the wisdom you've gained makes you dangerous, what Jung understood about the impossible choice this wisdom forces, and what happens to those rare individuals who choose to keep their sight even when keeping it costs them everything. Jung's understanding of the Sophia stage emerged from observing a specific pattern in his most psychologically advanced patients. These were individuals who had done years of inner work, had confronted their shadows, had integrated their rejected aspects, had achieved what most people would consider psychological health and wholeness. But then, something unexpected would happen. Instead of finding peace, instead of settling into comfortable wisdom, they would enter a period of profound crisis. They would report feeling alienated from everyone, not because they had become misanthropic or judgmental, but because they could no longer participate in the social performances that connection seemed to require. They could see the games people played, the roles everyone performed, the unspoken agreements that held relationships together. And having seen these mechanisms clearly, they couldn't pretend they didn't see them, couldn't play along anymore, couldn't perform the blindness that social belonging demanded. These individuals would come to Jung confused and isolated. They'd say things like, "I can see what everyone is really doing, and it's making it impossible to relate to them," or "I understand the hidden dynamics in every interaction, and it's destroying my ability to just be present with people," or "I know too much now, and the knowing is making me unbearable to be around." And Jung recognized this wasn't pathology. This was what he called the Sophia crisis, the dangerous phase where wisdom threatens to destroy the person who carries it. Because wisdom of this depth, this clarity, this unflinching honesty, is fundamentally incompatible with normal social functioning. Society operates on necessary illusions, collective agreements to not see certain things, shared blindness that allows people to remain comfortable with themselves and each other. And the person in Sophia stage can no longer honor those agreements, can no longer maintain that blindness, and this makes them dangerous. What Jung discovered was that Sophia wisdom emerges from a specific psychological achievement. You have to have faced and integrated your own shadow completely before you can see others' shadows clearly without projection. Most people who think they see through others are actually just projecting their own unacknowledged darkness onto everyone around them. They see manipulation everywhere because they haven't acknowledged their own manipulativeness. See narcissism everywhere because they haven't faced their own narcissistic tendencies. See deception everywhere because they're deceiving themselves. But individuals who've done genuine shadow work, who've acknowledged and integrated their own capacity for every human failing, they develop a different kind of sight. They can see shadow in others without judgment, without superiority, without projection. They see it clearly, accurately, compassionately, but they see it nonetheless. And this clear seeing changes everything about how they can relate to people. Here's what actually happens when you enter the Sophia stage. The scales fall from your eyes, not all at once, gradually, in moments that accumulate until you can't maintain your old perception anymore. You're in a conversation with someone you've known for years. They're telling you about their life, and suddenly you can see the narrative they're constructing, the way they're positioning themselves as victim or hero, the details they're including and excluding to maintain that position, the emotional manipulation embedded in how they're telling the story. Not because they're bad, but because everyone does this. Everyone constructs narratives that protect their self-image, but you never saw it before, and now you can't unsee it. You're watching a family interaction, and suddenly you can perceive the entire system. The roles everyone plays, the unspoken rules that govern who can say what, the designated scapegoat who carries the family shadow, the golden child who performs the family's idealized self-image, the enabler who maintains the system by smoothing over all dysfunction. The dynamics that have been operating for decades, invisible to everyone participating in them, but visible to you now with devastating clarity. You're in a work meeting, and you can see the power games happening beneath the professional language. Who's jockeying for position? Who's undermining whom? What's really being negotiated beneath the surface discussion? The hidden agendas that no one will acknowledge but everyone is responding to. And you realize that the actual conversation, the one that matters, is happening in subtext that only you seem to be perceiving. And this seeing, this penetrating clarity, it's not optional. You can't turn it off, can't choose to see some things and not others. Once the pattern recognition activates, it operates automatically. You see dynamics everywhere, in every interaction, every relationship, every system. And the seeing is exhausting because you're processing two layers of reality simultaneously. The surface layer that everyone else is responding to, and the shadow layer that's actually driving everything. Jung identified 3 specific dangers that emerge in the Sophia stage. Understanding these dangers is crucial because they represent the primary ways that dangerous wisdom destroys the people who carry it. The first danger is toxic isolation. When you can see what others can't see, when you understand dynamics that remain invisible to everyone around you, communication becomes nearly impossible. You try to share what you're perceiving, try to help people understand the patterns they're trapped in, and you're met with defensiveness, denial, anger. Because what you're seeing threatens people's self-image, challenges the stories they tell themselves, forces them to acknowledge shadows they've spent their entire lives avoiding. So they reject you, not because you're wrong, but because you're right in ways that feel unbearable to them. And as this happens repeatedly, as every attempt to share your perception results in conflict or disconnection, you stop trying, stop speaking, stop sharing what you see. You retreat into isolation, not because you want to be alone, but because being around people while seeing what you see and not being able to speak, it becomes intolerable. Jung documented that many individuals in Sophia stage become hermits, not through philosophical choice, but through the practical impossibility of maintaining relationships while carrying dangerous wisdom. They can't share what they see without damaging connections, can't pretend they don't see it without betraying themselves. So they choose isolation, choose to live alone with their clarity, rather than blind themselves to maintain belonging. But this isolation has a toxic quality, because the wisdom you carry was meant to be shared, was meant to serve, meant to help others see what they can't see themselves. When that wisdom is forced into silence, when it's locked inside with no outlet, it begins to poison you, turns into bitterness, cynicism, a kind of despairing superiority where you look at everyone else's blindness with contempt because you can't help them see and they won't let you try. The second danger is the martyr trap. Some individuals in Sophia stage make the opposite choice. Instead of retreating into silence, they become crusaders. They dedicate themselves to speaking truth, to exposing the shadows, to forcing people to see what they're avoiding. And they do this with missionary zeal, convinced that if they just explain clearly enough, if they just present the evidence compellingly enough, people will wake up. But Jung found that this approach destroys the truth-teller, because societies don't reward people who threaten their necessary illusions. They punish them, exile them, discredit them, make examples of them. The person who speaks uncomfortable truths becomes the problem, the troublemaker, the negative one, the person who ruins everything by not going along with the collective fantasy. And the Sophia stage individual who chooses this path ends up sacrificing themselves on the altar of truth-telling. They lose jobs, lose relationships, lose community, lose everything. And often, after years of this sacrifice, they realize that nothing has changed. People don't want the truth, don't want to see what they're not ready to see. And the martyr's sacrifice was meaningless, except as a warning to others about what happens when you speak dangerous wisdom out loud. Jung emphasized that this isn't heroic. It's self-destructive. It's wisdom turned into weapon against yourself. Because the person in Sophia stage isn't meant to wake everyone up, isn't responsible for forcing others to see. Their responsibility is to their own sight, to maintaining their own clarity, not sacrificing themselves trying to give that clarity to people who aren't asking for it and won't receive it if offered. The third danger is corruption of wisdom. This is the most insidious threat. The person in Sophia stage begins using their penetrating sight for power, for manipulation, for control. They can see people's weaknesses, can understand exactly what motivates them, can perceive the precise pressure points that would influence them. And instead of using this knowledge compassionately, they use it strategically. They become master manipulators, not obviously, not crudely, but with sophisticated understanding of human psychology that makes them extraordinarily effective at getting what they want. They can read people instantly, can craft their presentation to exploit whatever vulnerability they've perceived, can play on insecurities and desires with surgical precision because they see clearly what others are hiding from themselves. Jung documented cases of individuals who entered Sophia stage with good intentions, with genuine wisdom, and gradually became something dark. Because dangerous wisdom, when turned towards self-serving ends, when used to exploit rather than illuminate, becomes something monstrous, becomes predatory clarity, the ability to see through people used not to help them, but to use them. And the person who falls into this corruption often doesn't recognize what's happening. They tell themselves they're just being strategic, just navigating reality as it actually is, just using their gifts effectively. They rationalize their manipulation as pragmatism, their exploitation as wisdom, and they lose themselves in the process, become exactly the kind of shadow they used to see clearly in others. Here's what Jung discovered about how to navigate the Sophia stage without being destroyed by it. The wisdom has to be held in tension, not hidden, not weaponized, not sacrificed, held. You remain truthful to what you see without making it everyone else's responsibility to see it too. You speak when asked, when it's appropriate, when it might actually serve, but you don't crusade, don't force, don't martyr yourself on the altar of truth-telling. You maintain your relationships not by pretending you don't see what you see, but by recognizing that seeing clearly doesn't require you to verbalize everything you perceive. You can know someone's shadow motivations without confronting them about it, can understand a system's dysfunction without trying to dismantle it, can perceive the games people play without refusing to play along, when playing along causes no harm. This isn't dishonesty. It's what Jung called sophisticated consciousness, the ability to operate at multiple levels simultaneously, to be aware of shadow dynamics while participating in surface interactions, to hold wisdom privately while engaging publicly with the necessary fictions that social life requires. You're not blind. You're not pretending. You're just choosing consciously when and where your sight needs to be spoken, and when it can simply inform how you navigate without being announced. Jung emphasized that this requires tremendous psychological maturity. It's much easier to either retreat into isolation or become a truth-telling martyr than to hold the tension of seeing clearly while living normally. Most people can't do it. They either blind themselves to regain comfort, or they sacrifice themselves trying to make others see, or they corrupt their wisdom by using it for power. But the individuals who can hold this tension, who can carry dangerous wisdom without being destroyed by it, they develop what Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to operate from wisdom while remaining engaged with the world, to see shadow without being consumed by it, to understand darkness without becoming cynical, to perceive clearly without losing compassion. These individuals become what Jung described as the conscious helpers, not teachers, not gurus, not prophets, just people who can see clearly and use that sight in service of others when it's appropriate. When someone is genuinely ready, when the seeing might actually help rather than just disturbing surface peace, that person isn't ready to abandon. They learn to recognize the difference between people who are asking for sight and people who are asking for comfort, between moments when truth will catalyze growth and moments when truth will just create damage, between their responsibility to their own clarity and the temptation to make everyone else see what they see. And they develop what Jung called discriminating wisdom. Not all truths need to be spoken, not all shadows need to be exposed, not all dynamics need to be named. Some things are meant to remain in the realm of private understanding, known by you, informing your choices, but not broadcast to everyone who isn't ready to receive them. Here's what Jung found about what happens to those who successfully navigate the Sophia stage. They don't lose their dangerous wisdom, but they learn to carry it lightly. It stops being a burden they're desperate to share, or a weapon they're tempted to use, or a source of superiority that isolates them. It becomes simply what they know, information they have, sight they've developed, no more dramatic than any other skill or capacity. They can be with people without constantly perceiving and analyzing shadow dynamics, can turn off the penetrating sight when it's not useful, can engage with surface reality without feeling false because they're not denying the depths. They've simply chosen to give their attention to what's present rather than what's hidden, unless the hidden needs to be acknowledged. They develop genuine compassion for people still trapped in blindness, not condescending compassion, not superior compassion, but the compassion that comes from understanding that everyone is doing their best with the consciousness they currently have. That blindness isn't always chosen, that people can't see what they're not yet capable of seeing, and that forcing sight before someone is ready is violence, not service. These individuals often work in subtle ways. They don't have large platforms or obvious influence, don't write books about the shadows they see, or give talks about the truths people are avoiding. Instead, they show up in specific moments with specific people and say exactly the right thing that helps someone take the next step in their own seeing. They plant seeds. They ask questions. They reflect back what someone is almost ready to acknowledge, and then they let it go. Trust that person's process. Don't need to see the fruit of their influence. Jung documented that these individuals live what he called examined lives. They continue doing their own psychological work, continue integrating new layers of their own shadow, continue developing their own sight, because they understand that Sophia wisdom isn't a destination, it's an ongoing practice. There's always more to see, more depth to perceive, more subtlety to understand. And the moment they stop working on their own seeing, the moment they decide they're done, that's when their wisdom begins to corrupt. They also develop strong practices for metabolizing what they see, because penetrating sight creates psychological waste. Absorbing shadow dynamics from everyone around you, perceiving dysfunction constantly, understanding the darkness beneath surface interactions, this creates residue that has to be processed. So, they have rituals, creative outlets, ways of discharging the psychological material they absorb from operating with such acute awareness. Some write, some create art, some work with their hands, some spend time in nature. The specific practice doesn't matter. What matters is that they have ways of moving the wisdom through them rather than letting it accumulate until it becomes toxic. They understand that dangerous wisdom isn't meant to be hoarded, it's meant to flow, to inform, to serve, and then to be released so new seeing can emerge. If you're in the Sophia stage right now, if you're carrying dangerous wisdom that's threatening to destroy you, or isolate you, or corrupt you, Jung would tell you this: your sight is real. What you're perceiving is accurate. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're not seeing things that aren't there. You've developed clarity that most people will never develop. And that clarity is both gift and burden. But the wisdom doesn't have to destroy you, doesn't have to turn you into a bitter hermit or a self-sacrificing martyr or a sophisticated manipulator. You can learn to hold it in tension, to carry it lightly, to use it consciously when it serves, and keep it private when speaking. It would only create damage. You don't have to make everyone see what you see, don't have to expose every shadow, don't have to force awareness on people who aren't ready. Your responsibility is to your own sight, to maintaining your own clarity, to continuing your own work, and to showing up with your wisdom in moments when it's genuinely asked for and can genuinely help. The isolation you're feeling, it will shift as you learn to hold the wisdom more skillfully. You'll find the rare others who can also see, who carry similar clarity, who understand the weight of dangerous knowing. These connections are rare, but they exist, and they're worth the patience it takes to find them. Because relationship between two people who can see clearly, who can speak honestly about shadow without judgment or defensiveness, is unlike any other form of human connection. The temptation to use your wisdom for power, to manipulate with your sight, watch for it constantly, because it's subtle. It starts with small justifications, small strategic uses of your understanding, and it grows. The only protection is ruthless honesty with yourself about your motivations. Constant examination of whether you're using your wisdom to serve or to exploit. And the willingness to course correct immediately when you notice yourself sliding into corruption. Stay with your practices. Whatever helps you metabolize what you see, whatever allows you to process the psychological material you absorb from operating with penetrating awareness, because the wisdom will accumulate. Will become toxic if it's not moved through you. Needs expression, needs release, needs to flow rather than stagnate. And keep doing your own shadow work. Keep facing your own darkness. Keep integrating your own rejected aspects. Because the moment you stop working on your own seeing, the moment you decide you're finished with your own development, your wisdom begins to decay, begins to turn into arrogance or cynicism or bitterness. The clarity that could serve becomes the blindness that destroys. The Sophia stage is dangerous because the wisdom you carry threatens everything, threatens people's illusions, threatens social structures built on denial, threatens the comfortable blindness that most human interaction requires. But it doesn't have to threaten you, doesn't have to destroy you, doesn't have to isolate you completely or turn you into something monstrous. The wisdom can be integrated, can be held with maturity, can inform how you move through the world without dominating every interaction, can make you more effective, more compassionate, more genuinely helpful, rather than making you bitter and alone and corrupted by what you know. This is the test of the Sophia stage, not whether you can acquire dangerous wisdom, but whether you can carry it without being destroyed by it, whether you can see clearly and remain human, whether you can understand darkness without drowning in cynicism, whether you can perceive shadow without losing your capacity for genuine connection. That's what Jung meant when he called this stage dangerous. Not dangerous to others necessarily, dangerous to you, to your humanity, to your ability to remain engaged with life rather than withdrawing into superior isolation or sacrificing yourself on crosses no one asked you to die on, or corrupting your gifts into weapons of manipulation. Hold the wisdom. Speak it when it serves. Keep it private when speaking would only damage. Find the others who can see. Continue your own work. Metabolize what you perceive. And trust that your seeing, your dangerous knowing, serves purposes you may never fully understand. Seeds planted, questions asked, reflections offered, that create ripples in others' consciousness you'll never witness, but that matter nonetheless. You have sight now, clarity that can't be taken back, understanding that can't be unlearned. The question isn't whether you'll keep it. You will. It's yours now. The question is whether you'll let it make you bitter or wise, isolated or selectively connected, corrupted or conscious. That choice is yours. That's the freedom and the terror of the Sophia stage. The dangerous wisdom that can transform you or destroy you, depending on how you choose to carry it.